Welcome, Just a Family. Today's episode is going to be amazing. I'm your host, Melissa Krechler. I'm an identity coach and a spiritual teacher. Today, we are going to be talking about healthy sleep patterns. Today's episode is sponsored by a Phoenix Identity, which is my own company. We deal with, all of that internal mindset and emotions and creating a happy, healthy existence and lighting it all up when it doesn't work, because you got to blow that shit up when it doesn't work. Pardon my language. Anyway, today we are going to have an amazing episode on healthy sleep patterns. And in order to do that, we have my co-host today, who is the founder and owner of Exist Tribe, and that would be Robert Sweetman. Robert, would you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, Melissa. I was a Navy SEAL. I got out and changed my life completely to be a sleep scientist. Started this thing called Exist Tribe, and it's really all just about helping folks with their sleep, which I'm intimately connected to, familiar with, and all of that. So I'm happy to be here today.
Absolutely. And we are absolutely blessed to have you here. So what do you think is the most important thing people need to know about sleep? Let's just jump right into a huge topic. What is your favorite thing to talk about when it comes to sleep?
Well, there's a lot there. If I were to pick out one thing, I would say that people probably stress about sleep a little bit too much, and there's really no such thing as a perfect night of sleep. With that said, the most important thing for your sleep health is getting consistent sleep, right? Getting to bed at about the same time, waking up at about the same time, and of course, getting enough sleep, right? But if we can keep the consistency throughout our week and not deviate too much on the weekends, that aids us in that hormone production and feeling refreshed, feeling restored, and all the things we love about sleep.
So I love that you say consistency. Half of everything: mindset, physical health, mental health, emotional health, sleep health, right? All comes down to consistency. You and I are business owners. That comes down to, again, consistency. Consistency is so huge. Now, do you ever find that shaking it up every so often, or having a night where you don't get enough sleep, or how do I word this? I have evenings or nights when I don't go to bed early. Whether I'm up stressing about something, or I'm awake because I'm wired and I just can't get to sleep. And then the next morning I'm like, hey, Melissa, you need to get up. It's early. You have to get up super early. Go do this, go do that. And you almost feel more wired when you wake up. What do you think that is? Do you think that's healthy or not healthy? What do you think that is? Why would I feel like I'm wired at that point?
Well, it is what it is, because all of us who are parents know that when we have children, we are going to have a lot of sleep deprived nights, but we just keep on going, right? There is, anecdotally for me, there is something about, periodically I'll have like a short sleep night and I'll wake up feeling amped and charged. I feel great. And I don't know if that's sort of me doing my own sleep restriction, which is something we do as sleep coaches. If my body needed that, or if what we know about sleep deprivation is that, when in situations like when we're starving or we're hungry, sleep actually, this is with animals too, it kind of falls on the back burner, right? So there's a little bit about like your physiological function, there's a little bit about psychology. But there's a lot that goes into sleep. So, we'd have to unpack that individual night much more to better understand it. But I will say, if you go a night without sleeping, you just have one of those really tough insomnia nights, you'll be okay. You'll recover from it most likely. But you can definitely see that in your blood work as much as like 3 months later. It shifts your body so much. All of your hormones. I mean, there's a laundry list of processes, circadian rhythms, all these things that want to be in sync. And when they get off sync, you have all these fluctuations and a lot of things change. So, like I say, there's no such thing as a perfect night's sleep, but we try to get consistency. And if I'll take a page out of Dr. Matthew Walker's book, he's one of my favorite sleep scientists out of Berkeley. He will say that if you have a bad night's sleep, Don't try to make up for it. Don't try to, sleep throughout the day. Just get back into your schedule, get back into that
Yeah,
consistency.
I like that. That makes sense too, right? I try to nap during the day, or I don't try to nap. If I ever do nap during, I'm dead. I can't I can't function. If I nap in the middle of the day, I can't function for the rest of the day. It makes me sick to nap during the day. I don't know why, but that's just my body. But part of it is that, right? Is learning what your body needs. Wouldn't you say it's learning
Yeah.
your unique sleep cycles and what works for you and what doesn't work for you. Not everybody, in my opinion, and I'm not a sleep expert, that's your territory. That's why you created the Exist Tribe. But in my experience, it's everybody has that unique balance, right? Where I might sleep better 4 hours a night or 6 hours a night, where somebody else might sleep, 8 or 9 hours a night and need that extra time.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I agree with that. I mean, everybody's different, right? And everybody has a different sleep need. If you look at the larger organizations that sort of put out information about sleep, they'll say, like 7 to 9 hours of sleep is regular. Less than that, and you begin a short sleep. And we do have a lot of people in the United States and around the world for that matter that are short sleeping. The average for males, I think, is just under 6 hours. That's terrible. Some people are sleeping so little that it's just very unlikely that they're getting full restoration and all of the processes in their body that need to happen. But if you ask, a random panel of people, everyone is going to have different sleeping habits. If they really dig in and find out what the optimal sleep period is for them on a consistent basis, like for me, it's 7 hours and 15 minutes. It's going to be different for everybody, and that's okay. One interesting thing that I talk about a lot is different chronotypes, right? I mean, I'm a night owl and I like to stay up a little bit later and I like to wake up a little bit later. And that doesn't really work well with, the 6 a.m., 7 a.m., 8 a.m. start times with companies and corporations. So the people, if I'm a night owl and another type would be like a morning lark, well, that person fits into our society very well, right? But then the rest of us that are, night owls, we're kind of shamed. We're looked on upon as like, oh, he's lazy. I don't want to get up in the morning. But no, that's just how my natural circadian rhythm, prefers to fall into sleep. And really, if you look back to where we were at before, modern times, industrial times, that really aided us in the tribal sense, right? I mean, like one person goes to bed early, the other person stays up late, and you kind of have a little bit of overlap. So if you have this tribal setting, somebody's always awake so that, a lion, tiger, or bear doesn't attack you and get you. You have one person awake at all times kind of thinking. So I think that's, genetically how that occurred. But different chronotypes, different sleep needs. I think nutrition, sunlight, exercise, looking at, your body temperature throughout the day. All this stuff is important and everything is different for each person. That's what makes sleep coaching kind of a challenging endeavor.
It sounds like it would be. And even for me, identity coaching, right? Everybody's
Yeah.
so unique that it's like, okay, I got to get to know you first. So we have somebody watching says, loves this topic. I have to work on this regularly. So hard for me to sleep more than 6 hours. Absolutely. And, for quite a few people, it is hard to keep that consistency and to find what works for them. I wanted to mention, you were talking about the night owls and your general work day. I wonder what it would be like if businesses put into place 4 different archetypes when it comes to sleep, right? If you have a 9 to 5 business or even a 7 to 6 business, have your early risers come in the morning and spend the day till 3, right? 7 to 3. And then have your late risers come in later in the day and do 10 to 6, right? That would be an interesting concept for businesses to put into place to, what's the word I'm looking for? Not perpetuate, but encourage healthy sleep cycles.
Yeah. And I think that's part of a good work-life balance plan for companies. I find that a lot of companies are looking forward and changing the way they do business, and they are having higher levels of engagement with people. They're having more flexible schedules, and so yeah, I definitely see that as being a consideration for the future. Um, I mean, in terms of like children growing up through like the high school years, they tend, their sleep patterns are different than adults, and they tend to stay up a little bit later, wake up a little bit later, and that's okay. And they have different sleep needs as they go through this developmental process. But they've done studies where they allowed students to show up late to school, because most schools, you got to be there by 7:45 or whatever time. And I know one particular study I have in my mind right now, I can shoot over to you. They did a study where they shifted the start time to, I think, 9 a.m. and a couple of things happened. One, there were much higher SAT scores across the board for that period. And then the other thing that was even more remarkable is that the automobile accidents reduced, because between automobile accidents and suicide, those are the top causes of death for younger folks. So what's interesting is that just by shifting that time when they started school, they were able to alleviate a lot of the problems that students had in school. They're able to up their performance, how they felt. I would think like cognitive performance, like sharpness, better decision-making skills, especially when getting behind the wheel of a car. So I mean, I'm a big proponent of, things like that, adjusting things to be smarter for the people. But, society is what it is. And we have a lot of pressures, both within the corporation, like you're talking about, and within the school system, that just make it really difficult to do what we, like from the sleep science side of the house, what we think makes sense. So
It is. Society has become that way, though. There's so many expectations on what we have to do: work, school, business. All of these have to be in this little bubble. And I don't know how many individuals, even in my practice, that I don't have time for me. I don't have time for this. I don't have enough time for my family. I don't have enough. And there's always, I don't have enough time, or I can't make time. Or on the one hand, it's an excuse. And I understand the excuse, absolutely. And I validate the excuse. But on the other hand, if we don't make time for that, even if society tells us we can't, if we don't make time for that, then that's where we come with the issues, right? That's the lack of sleep, the feeling disconnected from ourselves, from our body, from society, because we don't feel like we have enough time. Routine is going to be a big one on that one. To create that consistency. What else was I going to say? There was another topic that within this that I wanted to touch on. Oh, my schools. So my daughters, I have two young daughters who are still in grade school. And both of them, one starts at 8:20 in the morning, then the other one starts at 9.
okay.
So a lot different on the time starts. And I noticed that they're not as groggy when they get up. They're not as tired. My oldest one, yes, because she has to get up and leave by 10 to 8. But the younger one doesn't leave until 20 after 8. And she's wakes up on her own and does what she needs to do, comes home and she's in a good mood. So yeah, there's a lot. So I wanted to touch on, you created an entire business based on sleep.
I did.
So tell us a little bit about that and what started that. Why sleep? You wouldn't think, do you just, and this is what people might be asking is, you created an entire business on sleep. Do you like sleep that much? Did you want to sleep all the time? Yeah, right. So what created that need to fuel that business?
Well, it's a very dark story, Melissa. I was in the military, and I was doing my normal deployment routine and so forth and so on. And we have a lot of trauma within, the military, both from, what we would call PTSD, or just anxiety from the op tempo, or traumatic brain injury is a big one. We have a lot of blast exposure, especially in the space of the military where I come from. And so guys and gals too are dealing with a ton of stuff, right? And so I had one friend that was dealing with quite a bit, and he wasn't sleeping. He was using Ambien to fall asleep or alcohol, and it's the vicious cycle that begins because you don't wake up feeling good. And so a lot of times you'll use stimulants to wake up, and then use sedatives to go to bed. And when you have sedatives in your system when you go to bed, your body can't go through all of the same processes in the same way, and so you're just not getting all of the efficiency of sleep that you want. And sometimes some of those processes are defunct, retarded, or non-existent altogether. And so what I noticed with this particular person, Ryan, who I was in a platoon with, he was really starting to slip. He just wasn't there, and he probably needed a lot more help than he was receiving. Definitely, that's the case. But at some point in time, the mental health really started to decline, and a couple of bad events occurred, and he was awake for like 5 days and just decided to end his life. So for me, this happens in the military, more often than I'd like to admit, but this one hit me hard, and I, kind of locked myself in the bedroom for a weekend. I was a little bit depressed about the whole thing. And so when I emerged from that process, I was looking at like, what the hell, right? First of all, but what can I wanted to figure out what was the cause of this? How did he get to this point? Am I next, right? I thought he was a better guy than I was in our military unit. And it's like, geez, could I be at risk for this one day? And so I really started to dig down into what I thought was causational. And Frank, his dad, really took a deep dive into traumatic brain injury. Ryan was suffering with a bit of that. I took the position of sleep. I thought sleep had something to do with it, but I didn't know anything, right? You don't know anything about sleep until you really start to do the research. You hear some of the things that people post on social media. You can't necessarily, listen to all that. So I started talking to psychiatrists, neurologists, all types of doctors, kind of found out who knew what they were talking about in the medical space. And what I found was that sometimes sleep can be causational in mental health issues. Previously, as short as like 10 years ago, we thought that mental health was the cause of sleep issues, but now we know it's sort of a bidirectional relationship. And so there's a lot more there to sleep health, right? And so what I found was that, in Dr. Mishra, I think you've met him. We've had, a long relationship and deep, talks about this. He's a psychiatrist. And, what I found was that if you're not getting good sleep, any mental health issues that you have are going to be exacerbated. You could have new mental health stuff come up. And if you're struggling with mental health, that you're not going to be able to recover no matter the medication or the prescription if you're not getting good sleep. So sleep is kind of this, this pillar of health, and it's absolutely, critical to get good sleep for good mental health. And there's a number of different, ways we can look at that and explain it. So for me, once I kind of figured out like, okay, yeah, sleep could be a big part of, suicidal ideations in this whole path to suicide. So is this, just a one-off thing that happened in the SEAL teams? And it turns out that it's not. We have a lot of issues that, could end up in suicide or, marital problems at home or drinking problems. And I started to unpack this whole thing. And then I looked at, okay, well, is it in the Navy? Yeah, it's in the Navy. Is it in the military? I read the RAND report on sleep with, Dr. Troxel and all them. They did a great job of outlining how little sleep the military gets and all of the different hypervigilance problems. Like, I'll give you two examples right now. In the military, you are trained for situational awareness and attention to detail, right? Of course, that's going to cause hypervigilance, right? And over time, over a career, you really sort of build that amygdala response. It's like you've been in the gym pumping iron. That amygdala is so sensitive to so many things around you. You hear car alarms, you hear babies crying, and that could save your life downrange. But it's not just military. What I found out was that people in the civilian space can have significant anxiety from all sorts of things. And the way that they perceive that can be just as impactful as a combat scenario. We're all humans. We're all in this, experience together. And so if you have, COVID was a big stressor on a lot of people. Outside of the medical issues, there's mental health issues, but then also, here in the U.S. we had elections, tons of drama. But whatever that stress was, if you're an executive and you have a high pressure job and you've been pushing yourself too hard and you're maybe not looking after your sleep. So once I started to unpack this whole thing, I'm like, geez, this is a massive problem. And so the foundation of what I wanted to do, I don't have all the answers, but the foundation was sleep is a global problem. It's a sleep epidemic in every first world country. And I want to solve that without pills or surgery. I wanted to solve it in a non-invasive, natural way. And so I had to figure out how to do that. And so wasn't stuck to one methodology, one piece of technology or anything like that. I had the foundation of, okay, here's the problem. I see it. I want to better understand it. And I want to find ways to solve this. Very, very simple, right? So that's allowed me for the last 4.5 years since I started Exist Tribe to go down a number of different paths and figure out like what works, what doesn't work. And because we're not, a company that, came up with a widget and we're fixed to that and want to sell it, we've been able to shapeshift and mold ourselves into a very, very, human focused company, right? We've been able to pivot and make decisions without having any constraints. We don't have any venture capital. And so now where we're at is we have an incredible offering for people. This is my 62 Romeo shirt. It's a documentary we did, and it's I'll go ahead and tell you, but the intention is to launch 62 Romeo as a nonprofit. And it'll be focused mostly on veterans, but all the stuff that we're doing, anybody can do. I'd be happy to share with you like some of the elements of what we do. But absolutely, it's designed to help people for the long term, help them establish those behaviors, those routines that aid them. It's not a one-stop shop. It's not the pill, right? We're kind of the anti-pill, if you will. So I feel like that's probably a good introduction. Did you have any questions about what I went over?
Not questions, comments. Yes, absolutely. Questions in the long term. Yes, absolutely. I have, how do I want to start this? I started my own business. Not I didn't lose anybody personal to suicide at that point. Yes, I did actually, but there was one woman that I lost to suicide about 6 years ago. And when I first started my coaching business, and I'm an identity coach for anybody watching, I help people, bust up their lives when they're not happy and figure out what exactly is going wrong. But the reason I started is because when I first started coaching, my 14-year-old son or 13-year-old son at the time was having a lot of mental health issues, just surrounding coping mechanisms, learning how to deal with emotions. It was very emotionally triggered. And at that same time, two of my favorite musicians had committed suicide, and that would be Coronado and Linkin Park's Chester Benningfield. And I was devastated, and I was driving home, and I've said this before, I was driving to an expo, and it took me about an hour in the car, and I pulled over right on the side of the highway. I pulled over and I did a Facebook Live because I was doing lives at that point. And I said, I figured it out. Like I meant to be a teacher. And I'm crying on this live just because I understood the mentality of being there. I understood the process that it takes mentally and emotionally to get from being okay to not being okay, to using stimulants, drugs, alcohol, abusing sex and other toxic behaviors and patterns to remove or replace an emotion, right? You're trying, in essence, you're trying to give something back to yourself that you're not getting, or numb yourself because you can't handle what you're getting. And it's similar with sleep, because if you're not getting sleep, you'll do whatever you need to do to try to get that sleep, right? It's not an addiction, you need it. It's absolutely something you have to live with, is being able to sleep. And so I resonate with why you started. Now, while my situation wasn't as traumatic, because that is wholeheartedly traumatic, I have a huge soft spot in myself and my business for veterans, because there are so many positions in this world, military, even actors, actresses, musicians, anybody, politicians who are in high profile positions, who have to live, breathe, eat, sleep, maintain a certain persona for an extended period of time, don't know how to cope with that. They lose sight of themselves, their identity, right? You don't feel like you are yourself anymore, right? You're no longer a civilian. And I can use that terminology because even we watched the Oscars last night. And I wasn't necessarily going to talk about this, but we watched the Oscars last night, and I watched it live, and I watched Will Smith, and I watched his reaction. And everybody's holding all of these people to a higher standard and realizing that they're human. At their core, they're human. Now, I'm not condoning what he did. I'm not supporting or denying what he did, but he's human. And there's a standard we hold for people in the military, for people in politics, for people in the spotlight to be a certain way. And that makes us lose a part of who we are, or feel like we lose a part of who we are. And for veterans, for me, it is the mentality. It's, continuing to know who you are. And I had talked to Mark about this, because yes, you did introduce me to Mark and Dr. Mishra, and wonderful people. And it really is, when you lose that sense of self and that sense of identity, that spirals into everything. Absolutely everything. And yeah, so I feel for your situation, and I definitely would love to help out in that situation, because I know how to get in there. I know how to reconnect to your identity, right? My entire business is reclaiming your identity and who you're supposed to be and who you are, and reacclimating to being your identity and not what everybody else expects from you. Okay, anyway, now that that's out of the way, I wanted to talk to you about somebody in my own life, and that would be somebody I'm very close with. I love this person to bits and pieces. They don't sleep. They don't sleep. And when I say they don't sleep, they are maybe, if they're lucky, maybe getting an hour to 3 hours a night. I will talk to this person and they're delusional.
Yeah.
At points. And so I'm seeing the effect that a lack of sleep has on this person, and they're trying to medicate, trying to, readjust their life. There's the mental in it now. There's the physical in it now. There's so many issues now related to stress and a lack of sleep. So I wanted to talk to you about what can happen when you don't get enough sleep. And I know I did an episode on this already, but it needs to be talked about, especially even more, is what are the signs of not sleeping enough? What happens if you don't? Why do we need to make sleep a priority? There's a better way to ask that.
Yeah, well, in the short term, and by the way, I do free consultations to talk to folks if you ever wanted to connect us. And I think the first thing is to, talk to he or she's physician and see if there's some underlying physical conditions. Sleep apnea really just wreaks havoc on people's sleep. Typically, there's a number of different things that the pulmonary doctor will give somebody. Once they're diagnosed, there can be, chemical imbalances, there can be neurological issues. So you really want to look at those things first with your doctor. But then outside of that, and I would say, and the reason why cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia has like a 70% effective rate and is like the number one treatment for sleep is because, and I feel like you probably work in this space as well, but that's because a lot of it is within ourselves, right? And okay, that's easy enough to say, but how do we change that? And I can get to that in a second. But to better answer your question, it starts with lizard brain. That's a word we like to use. Lizard brain. You're foggy. You're cloudy. If you are going 20 hours of wakefulness without sleep, that's when you begin to get to the same cognitive performance of somebody who's legally intoxicated with alcohol. And you can do, there's a number of different tests to see how sharp someone is, but nobody wants somebody that's been drinking and driving kind of thing. Emotional stability, that's a big one. You can be all over the place, up and down, and you mentioned delusional. I think with prolonged sleep deprivation, that's absolutely, I'll just tell you, I went through training in the military, and our particular training is a little bit crazy. They have this whole thing that they call Hell Week, and you have to stay up for a whole week. It's crazy. It's actually 5.5 days, so not a full 7 days, but geez, like you're awake forever. Up and down with the sun, and you lose your mind. So delusional, yeah, I was delusional during that. So I can tell you firsthand that is absolutely a symptom. But even if we, I think they say losing 1 hour of sleep for 5 days consecutively. So if you normally sleep 8 hours and you get 7 hours of sleep, losing that 1 hour a day consecutively, I believe is 5 days, gives you the same, physiological impact of like not sleeping at all one night. And if you've ever not slept one entire night, it's a bad day. The next day you're worthless. Don't even think about going to work. You're making up stuff, calling in sick. I don't feel well. So in terms of more of the things that we don't really understand that happen when we sleep deprive, this is a big deal with Navy ships, because they have these rotating watch cycles, which just means that somebody has to be in charge and awake and alert while you're underway. Always somebody has to be on watch. But they'll rotate that. And so sometimes when you rotate your sleep schedule, it causes a lot of the problems that I'm about to talk about. And so, the ideal situation for the Navy that we've been talking about for years is to get on a consistent schedule. Like, okay, maybe you are sleeping during the day and working during the night, but as long as it's during the same period of time, and we can play with the lights and stuff like that, it's actually healthier. And so the reason why is because our bodies are asking, to be on a normal schedule. So we have all these processes that can go through a normal circadian rhythm. So circadian rhythm, what does that mean? That just means, circadia, it's like one day, right? So in tune with one day. What decides the day? Well, that's the earth, right? And the sun is like one of our biggest indicators of that 24-hour cycle. Humans, our natural endogenous cycle is actually, the average is more than 24 hours. So left in a dark cave, they've done tons of studies on this. We will actually fall into our cycle, which could be 25 hours, 26 hours, whatever. So we really need that sunlight and that reset every day to keep on a 24-hour cycle. But with that said, we have multiple circadian rhythms throughout our body. We have this melatonin cycle. All right, the pineal gland in the brain is squeezing out that melatonin to help us go to bed. We have the cortisol cycle. These are all different circadian rhythms, and there's different parts of our body that give us indicators on how to keep those rhythms not only functioning on a daily basis, but synchronized with each other, right? So One interesting one that I think the viewers might like hearing is about the leptin and ghrelin cycles, right? And so if you're sleep depriving, leptin and ghrelin are hormones that make you feel, hungry or full, right? So what happens is when you're sleep deprived, is you are more hungry and less satisfied. Just to keep it very simple. And when they've done studies where they sleep deprive folks and put a buffet in front of it and they sneak in little chocolates and less healthy food, and the sleep deprived mind is hungrier and goes towards those less healthy foods with high sugar, high salt, things like that automatically. And so with the with the well slept body, the leptin and ghrelin hormones are in balance, and you naturally feel you're going to fall into a better eating pattern. Now, we can get into gut health and nutrition and all that's very important. But if you're sleep depriving, just the immediate is that you could be cognitively inhibiting your ability to do normal things that, somebody that's been awake for a full day legally shouldn't be doing, like driving a car, anything heavy machinery. You're in there chopping food with a knife and you cut your finger. So cognitive performance declines, hormones are out of whack, emotional instability, not really liking your life that day. But that's the immediate stuff, right? When you talk about some of the stuff that I deal with on a daily basis with these guys and gals that have had a military career where they've sleep deprived themselves, they've forced themselves to have, maybe they didn't force themselves, maybe it was forced by them, on them by the command or the deployment cycle. But at any rate, they haven't gotten good sleep over a very long period of time. Oh man, the list of health problems that start to pop up are endless, right? I mean, I've seen just, and some of this stuff isn't well documented and isn't well tested, but I can tell you, I've seen a lot of trends towards cancer, towards hypertension, and there's some studies that kind of dig into that, but there's still a lot more research that needs to be done. But there's no question that a lifetime of sleep depriving is going to lead to issues. We know that there's a plaque buildup if you're not getting deep sleep to wash away that plaque. That's precursor for Alzheimer's, right? That beta amyloid, right? So all of these things are just telling us that not only in the short term, but in the long term, we really should focus on our sleep health. We should also focus on exercise and nutrition, but sleep health is often overlooked. And so that's a lot of what I do, mostly education, exposing people to the reality of what's going on. Everybody has their preconceived notions. Everybody gets their, tidbits of information off social media. But the real information, and I'll tell you, most people that I talk to and coach, they don't have the right information. The real information, once you expose it, is very enlightening. And when you take on some of the practices and the behaviors, it takes a little bit of time, but you can totally reshape your life. You can go from just really hating yourself and get onto a better, we recommend a lot of other things like the nutrition and exercise and stuff like that. But once that sleep starts to fall in place, it's almost like everything else just naturally starts to fall into place. So I'll pause there. Did that kind of answer your question?
Absolutely. It's interesting how many different things cycle in with each other, right? Your mental health, your physical health, your sleep health, because that should be its own option, is sleep health, right? So you being a sleep coach help with sleep health, right? But in helping with sleep health, you're also helping with gut health, your health mindset, with physical activity, all encompassing, because you're right. If you don't get enough sleep, you feel like crap the next day, and then you're useless. Not useless. I hate that word. My husband says that word, and I want to just Bart Simpson him when he says it, because it's one of the most irritating words in the world. Yes, he is a sleep coach. We had a comment on Twitch. So, but my husband doesn't sleep enough, and I can tell, because if the next day, if he's really busy, if he's got a lot going on, he's a little bit more cranky, right? And just not wanting to really eat anything healthy. So I see that. And I challenge anybody watching, if you have not had enough sleep, or if you check your sleep health, if your sleep health is on track and you feel good about it, check how you're feeling. Check in with the other areas and see if those are on point as well. And then ask your health. Alcohol is a very bad thing to help you sleep. And when we're done, go back to the start of the video. We did mention, and Robert mentioned, that there are a lot of things people will do and take prior to sleeping or in order to sleep that are actually extremely toxic behaviors. And that's another thing I was going to ask you. Thank you, actually, because that helped. My 19-year-old son came over the other day and had lunch with his mom the other day. And he said to me, he said, oh, I'm not sleeping enough. And he does struggle with insomnia. And I said, oh, I'm not surprised. He's 19. And he's like, yeah, I started taking melatonin. And I'm like, why are you taking melatonin? I said, do not take melatonin unless you absolutely need to take melatonin. Melatonin has been an extremely huge fad lately, or new, not necessarily new, but very trendy. And I remember I used to work at my local post office, and my shift ended at between 12 and 1 a.m. Add on to that an hour drive just to get home. So I would get home 2, 3 in the morning, and then I wouldn't be able to fall asleep until 4 in the morning. And I would want to sleep longer, of course, right? I'd want to be able to get my time. And I started, one of my coworkers, he's like, oh, take melatonin. And so I tried it once. I tried it for a couple nights. I woke up raging, absolutely and utterly enrageous. I was mad at everybody and everything. It was irrational. There was no reason for me to be so angry. I had my neighbor's son come and ask my son to play it like 8 or 9 in the morning on a Saturday, and I lost it. I was like, do not ring my doorbell. And I felt horrible. And it was because I wasn't sleeping enough. So melatonin, what are your suggestions on melatonin?
Well, again, we start to get into sort of medical advice space, but I'll just say from what I see in my perspective, melatonin is completely unregulated. You'll see a bottle that says 5 milligrams, 10 milligrams, 20 milligrams. All of those are too much. But even when they break these things down and test them in laboratories, and none of them are ever what they say. It's almost like, here, throw the same pill in all these bottles and just label them differently. Completely unregulated. There's no checks and balances on those. But what type of person needs melatonin, right? Because our brains, like we mentioned before, that it creates melatonin. It naturally creates melatonin every single night as part of the process for us to go to bed. If you're a healthy adult, there's no need to take melatonin, right? Because your brain should be producing it. If you're jet lagged, then your that circadian rhythm for melatonin is going to be shifted, right? And so sometimes you can find relief with taking melatonin at the time when you are going to bed if your melatonin production hasn't already started, depending on which direction you go for travel. Elderly people, folks that have been on this earth for a long time, and that melatonin is not being produced as much, they can find a lot of benefit in melatonin supplements. But if you're taking melatonin supplements you're putting melatonin directly into your stomach and using that to have melatonin in your body before you go to sleep, that's really hormone replacement, isn't it? Because we naturally produce it, now we're taking it when we don't really need it. So I'm not against melatonin. People, can have a bottle and keep it with them when they're traveling, or maybe they had, shifting back and forth a couple of nights in their schedule and they're trying to get back onto a normal schedule. That's okay. But what we don't want is to have a dependency. right? And you have this physiological dependency because now what motivation does your brain have to push out that melatonin when it's flooded with melatonin because you just took 20 to 100 times the amount that you would normally, have in your system because you're taking this, over the counter melatonin. But then there's also the psychological association with taking the pill, going to sleep, taking the pill, going to sleep. And a lot of times folks get dependent on that. And it could be, funny enough, it could be a sugar pill, right? It could be a
Yep.
placebo. And you could take that pill. And if you believe that it helps you go to sleep, then it helps you go to sleep. So that's stuff that we have to talk about, like, identify that, association with what makes you feel ready for sleep, what makes you go to sleep, and getting some correct thoughts in our brain, but then scaling it back a little bit and looking at what are the behaviors throughout the day and what are the behaviors immediately before bed. Because I can tell you, I'll tell you my story. I definitely slept terribly for a long time. And I was diagnosed with sleep apnea. And part of that, I was gaining more weight and I wasn't sleeping in the right position. And so a lot of those symptoms I've alleviated, but the big one was anxiety. I was carrying so much anxiety from the pressure of being in the military that I couldn't go to sleep when I needed to go to sleep. And then I'd wake up to anything, right? And so I developed an addiction. Okay. So I was taking NyQuil to go to bed. I thought, how bad can it be? It's just cough syrup. You can buy it for $5 at the pharmacy. But what it did was develop a dependency. And I've heard other people that do this, but for me personally, it became a problem, right? Because I wasn't solving the issue, right? I was doping myself up to go to bed. The first sleep cycle was impacted by this chemical that I put into my body. My whole body is not going through the processes that it should, but still, it wasn't alleviating the problem, right? And the problem was me dealing with how I felt, my sympathetic nervous system response, and how I was arriving at the time that I was supposed to go to bed. And so, the solution, thank goodness I was able to get off that stuff. But whether it's, NyQuil or pills or whatever, that, again, talk to your physician. If you need to take a sleep pill, you have a death in the family, you have some hard stuff you're dealing with. I'm not saying that's against the rules. What I am saying is there's no indication that sleeping pills are better than other modalities. And over time, it's meant to be a short-term solution. It's not meant to be something that you're on for the next 5 years. And there are people who stay on this stuff. Yeah.
Yep.
The solution is
look into every scenario.
Every scenario. The solution is, if we keep it very, very simple, there is a pendulum within our body represented by that, circadian rhythm, and it swings to the left and to the right every day. And one side is wakefulness. There's body temperature increase. There's sunlight. There's a ton of photo signaling that goes on. There's, activity, there's cortisol, there's social interactions. And so we really want to embody that, like live your life to the fullest, exercise in the morning, even if it's just a little bit, get out in sunlight at least 30 minutes a day, do these things so that when you get to the sleep period and we turn off the lights and we start down regulating for sleep, now our body and our brain and our suprachiasmatic nucleus, that body clock in there, it has sensed that the pendulum has swung to full wakefulness. We're living our best lives. And then when we come back to sleep, it actually becomes very easy, right?
A lot of very interesting topics. I love it. I absolutely love it. I wholeheartedly agree with you that sleep is very underrated. And if we want to have happy and healthy mentality and spirituality, physicality, all of it, we need to incorporate a little bit more focus on our sleeping patterns and techniques. One of the things I always love to say is that 85% of our reality is dictated by what's inside of our head, what we believe, right? If you're not sleeping, there could be a medical reason, but Could it be mentality? Could it be energetics? Could it be the anxiety, the doubt, the stress of day-to-day living, the stress of not sleeping enough? There are so many different scenarios about that. So yeah. One of our viewers is going to sleep now. It's 10 p.m. They're in Czech Republic, which is quite interesting because my husband's family is from Czech Republic. My father-in-law and mother-in-law were born and raised in Czech Republic. So that's pretty interesting. I had to shout out because that's pretty interesting. I haven't had that happen yet. Always gonna love it when that happens. But sleep is huge. Sleep is huge. Prague, by the way. Just I'm being asked where. Prague.
Oh yeah. Prague, the best.
Sleep is huge. It is. I haven't been there personally. My husband has a few times with his parents because they still have family there, but just the pictures and the stories are apparently to die for beautiful. So I'm excited. Eventually, I think my husband and I are going to go on a 1-month trip throughout the UK. The UK, Europe, and the whole thing. I want to do it all. I want to go on the trains and have some fun. So we got to wait until the kids are a little bit older. So I don't want to take them with me. Only until they're all a little bit older. We're close, but not close enough. Anything else you would like to make sure that people understand about sleep, about healthy sleep patterns, and not creating those toxic sleep habits?
Yeah, absolutely. Getting back to consistency, that's the number one thing. Making sure that you're not consuming too much alcohol, pills, things that are going to affect your sleep. You want to get good sleep. Water, you want to stay hydrated, but not too much that you're waking up frequently to use a restroom. And I think for us, in what I focus on is a number of different things, probably 4 categories: light and sound therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, sleep education. And then we also do breathing exercises, meditation. It's that relaxation response that we're trying to get to. But without digging into that, we don't have enough time to get into that stuff. Sort of creating a routine before bedtime, I think, is one of the most effective things. So we have a sleep device that we built, and it's kind of like a scheduler. And the way that thing works, and the way that other people should try to, in my opinion, schedule their sleep is, okay, if I know I have to get up to work, let's say I have to get up at 6 a.m., right? And I need 8 hours of sleep. Now you may need a little bit less, a little bit more. You need to figure out yourself, right? But if I need to wake up at 6 a.m., then I need an 8-hour sleep period. So that's not 8 hours in bed. That is 8 hours from falling asleep to waking up. So what helps out is if we schedule it so that 6 a.m., then our bedtime is 10 p.m. We can't hop into bed after, working on emails and getting totally activated with everything in life and expect to fall asleep. And I think a lot of us schedule it that way and end up sitting and tossing and turning in bed. And then we stress about it and we're like, oh, I'm not going to get enough sleep because I'm not getting sleep right now. And it's just a vicious cycle. So if we say if our bedtime is 10 p.m., then 9 p.m. is when we start our bedtime routine, right? So that's when we put on the bedtime clothes. Nothing has to happen right at 9, but we start winding down. We turn off the TV, we turn off the lights in the house, and we start making this our tranquil space and preparing for bed. If we have, breathing exercises for free online, or you can just go to YouTube, doing stuff like that to, downregulate, to deactivate your central nervous system. A lot of times that really helps with anxiety and racing thoughts and stuff like that. But at any rate, we really want to calm down and get prepared for bed so that we're cruising into bed. And by the time 10 o'clock hits, we're falling asleep. And so then we have a full 8 hours of sleep. And what happens if you do this, what's interesting is that you don't need an alarm anymore. You wake up at 6, boom, you pop up. And if you're popping up at 5:30, then you need a little bit less sleep in your sleep period. You can start dialing it in, right? But you shouldn't, if you're getting good sleep, you should not need an alarm to wake up. you should pop up naturally. And if you're waking up groggy, I mean, that's an indicator that you're not getting enough sleep or good sleep.
I have an interesting, I go to bed, I don't have a routine, but I go to bed, lie in bed, do everything I need to do because I still have kids and animals that I have to deal with and get them to bed. So I do their bedtime routines. Then I climb into my bed and then it's like, now see, I'm a mindset expert. So getting my mind to calm down and removing all that stress and struggle is pretty easy. I'm not going to say all the time because even I have my moments, and like I'm sure you do. We all have those moments, but I will go and I will lie in my bed and I'll scroll but see, again, mentality. I have a different mentality than most, where I'll scroll on Facebook or TikTok, or I'll read a book and I wind down. I'll fall asleep doing that because I don't allow what's going on in the media or in the news or online to affect my mentality unless I want it to. I have that control. I've set that boundary. So yeah, I'll read when I wake up in the morning. Lately, I think it's in preparation of this episode, is I'm waking up between 6:30 and 7:30 in the morning, and I don't want to get out of bed until like 8:30, right? So I'll get up and I'll again scroll on my phone. I keep the first hour or two of my morning, other than getting my kids ready for school or whatever they need done, that first hour of my day is mine. Whether that's me reading a book, whether that's me, I will start my day the way that I end my day every day. And I feel better. I feel relaxed. I feel like I've actually put myself first in the day and be like, okay, I did my thing, what I wanted to do, whether it was binge watching a show or what have you, right? I did absolutely nothing. And now I can start my day. And I find that there's a huge difference in that. And I like that I like the routine. I hate routines, hate with a passion, but I like the routine that I've created for myself because it's not rigid. I could never be in the military. I would lose my ever-loving mind just on the routine. Never mind everything else that you guys went through, just on the routine alone. I would be like, no, I don't want to do it. Nope, I don't want to do it. not gonna do it. And that was but I've always been that way. You tell me I have to do something and I'm probably going to tell you it's not going to happen. If you tell me, oh, you could do this, I'll be like, well, then I'm going to do it. Right? I'm an oddball. I like it, but I'm an oddball. So, and I just totally lost my train of thought because
you're perfect just the way you are. And it's funny that sometimes routines are boring, but for sleep health is the best thing for us, just for the consistency piece. So
yeah, and you have to do what works for you. 15-second breathing technique. I will spout this every episode if I have to. 15-second breathing technique. 5 inhale, hold for 5, exhale for 5. That is the most relaxing breathing technique I have ever experienced. It's easy, it's simple, and it takes 15 seconds. And you don't feel weird or look weird doing it. So you can do it in the middle of an argument and you'll be totally fine. So that for me is my greatest tip on meditation is 15-second breathing technique. It relaxes you like nothing else. All right. Well, since we are climbing up towards that hour, I am going to say thank you so very much, Robert. I really enjoyed this episode. If anybody wants to connect with Robert and discuss sleep coaching and everything that he does at Exist Tribe, you can find him in the links. He has his LinkedIn link up. You can also, and I wasn't going to allow this because I don't allow promotions, but you can also find him at existtribe.com, which is his company on sleep experts, because that's your main focus is sleep. This episode is sponsored by myself, A Phoenix Identity. where I help you get to the root cause of your mindset issues. And we light it up, set it all on fire, throw it into a dumpster. We reclaim your identity and recreate a life that you love, that's for you and made by you, because you have to be unique. It's identity wise. Anyway, I absolutely love this episode. I think that, again, sleep is way too important for people not to put on a platform. And thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me, Melissa.
Absolutely. For everybody watching, please connect. Just Alive TV. You can like, follow, and share on every platform because we have accounts on just about every platform. You can find us at the website, www.justalivetv.com. If you would like to be a co-host, or you have a featured topic, or you'd like to help by sponsoring the show, please reach out to me at connect@justalivetv.com. Lots of love, Just a Family. I will see you on the next episode.